All right, everybody in the Code 3 community, welcome back. Glad to have you. Today, we're going to talk about inflation. No shocker there. Obviously, big news came out that inflation's 7.5% again year over year. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time on inflation. Everybody, well, I am, but not just talking about the news report of what the inflationary number was. We all know it's been nuts for months, and that pretty much says it all. But I do want to hit a couple things here to kind of set the table about misinformation and to illustrate just how bad uh, the central planners are scrambling to try to downplay, how bad this really is for folks. So, and then I'm going to get into really how this affects us, what we can do at the Main Street level, and and go from there. So let me share my screen here. All right. So the zoom that up so you can see it. So here, this is the day before the most recent CPI reports were released. The White House press secretary, if you'll notice right here, they're talking about they're expecting high year-over-year inflation reading, and that the White House has said that individuals should focus on month-over-month increase rather than the annual jump based on what they've seen in the last year. So they're saying, hey, let's pay attention to what the month-over-month is. So they're obviously expecting it to decline month-over-month and thinking, well, maybe the last the whole year's averages are kind of killing us on the year-over-year report. So they kind of stuck their foot out there in front of them a little bit on making that, because when you get over to the Wall Street Journal talking about inflation hitting 7.5% year over year, if you come right down here at the bottom, right down here at the bottom, you'll see that 0.6% last month, holding steady at the same pace as December. So if you look at, and December was pretty bad, but 0.6, we take that out over 12 months, it's 7.2% a year. That's nothing great. That's nothing to write home about. And then here I want to talk about some misinformation, or I shouldn't say misinformation, but maybe trying to downplay or minimize what it really is. Says high inflation is the, so we're looking right here, is the dark side of the unusually strong economy that has been powered in part by government stimulus to counter the pandemic's effect. All right, well, let's talk about that. It First of all, the illness didn't cause this problem. It may have been the thing that humans made reactions to, and those reactions are what caused this problem. So, when you look at it and it says strong economic or a strong economy is what's causing this, ask yourself, do you really feel like the economy's been strong in the last couple of years? Absolutely not. It's been a mess. I mean, we couldn't get toilet paper for a while. I mean, you go in grocery stores right now, which I rarely do, but I couldn't believe how many bare shelves there were. We build houses, and we're already talking with clients saying, things that we normally order at sheetrock, that we're going to be ordering that stuff when we're staking the foundation out before we even dig the hole for the basement. So, I mean, there's supply chain disasters. Prices are through the roof. This is not a strong economy. You see them mention things about wage increases and strong wage increases. No, they're not strong wage increases. They're not making any more money, and or I should say, workers aren't. They're not having any increase in purchasing power is what I mean. Sorry about that. So let's take a look at this here. Zoom up on that so you can see it. You can go to the BLS calculator. They got an inflation calculator, and these are using the government's numbers. And obviously, I don't care which political office is in power, they're going to use numbers that are most favorable to them, because nobody likes inflation for an election year. Politicians, they want to get elected more than anything, and they know this is bad news for them, and it would be if the Republicans were in there too. It'd be, and if they were facing these numbers, it would also be bad news for them. So what you do is just go to the BLS using their numbers again. So very conservative estimate. You could just type in, say, in year 2007, so that's 15 years ago, you were making $22 an hour. Where are we at today? If tell you got to be at or even just go $20 an hour. Tell you got to be at 27.12 an hour to have the same purchasing power. So in other words, you have to make $27.12 an hour today if you made $20 an hour in 2007 to buy the same amount of bread, the same amount of milk, the same amount of vehicles, and so forth. Now those numbers or underreported. So if you're making $27 an hour today and you feel like you're making more money, you're not, because your money, the currency that you're making, only reflects, it's a unit of measure. It reflects your purchasing power in the real economy. How many goods and services can you acquire? And we simply trade the paper money to acquire them. So if you're not making at least that using the government's numbers, then you are going backwards over that 15 years. And this leads me right to my point. Why is um, inflation a threat to generational freedom? Well, it destroys purchasing power over periods of time. It's a hidden tax. They're never, they can spend all the money they want. I've talked about this on other videos, but you could run the debt to GDP. In other words, pretend you make $100 a month in your house, and that's the maximum amount of money your family can earn, and your debt obligations are $125 a month, or I should say a year, just to keep it simple. um well, you got you're $25 underwater a year. Well, how long can you do that? You can do it forever if somebody will finance you. So the government can too. So they borrow money. So one way they can help erase some of that debt is through inflation. If they can make the GDP, their receipts essentially show higher sales volumes, that gap will shrink. So I always use the John Deere tractor example. You make 100 John Deere tractors in your GDP. That's all our country makes for this example in a year, and they cost $1 a piece. Our GDP is $100, and if our debt obligation annually is 125, then we have a $25. We're $25 in the hole there. So let's say we put emission systems on those same tractors, and we still only make 100 tractors, but they cost 100, or they cost $1.15. Now our GDP is $115, and our debt obligations were 125. So we close that gap from -25 to -10, and that's the way inflation works. Debt-based systems require inflation. So just because we're seeing this in the news, and it's big news here over the last year or so, this has been the case for decades. I mean, it's just nobody notices it. When you're a couple percent and a half, 3%, the milk costs a little more, Starbucks is a little more, nobody notices. Well, people are noticing now, and that's why we're pushing the message out that this has been going on forever. And if you're not in a position to benefit from inflation, then you're going to get crushed. How does that tie to freedom? Well, talking the mass numbers, or the mass numbers of the population, most Americans don't have much liquidity, and most Americans don't have much or any assets. Assets benefit from inflation. Just look at the stock market. What's it doing? It's going through the roof. What is real estate doing? Going through the roof. So as that money that the government creates circulates around the economy, it ends up in assets, and people controlling those assets, they pace inflation or exceed inflation. So the value of those properties go up, or the value of those stock holdings go up. If you're in real estate, your rent goes up. So you're staying up with inflation. And then if you're pairing that with some debt, you're actually hedging against inflation. Well, if you're a wage earner, or you're on fixed retirement income or something like this, it's crushing you. It's killing your purchasing power. We're taught to only think in dollars. How many dollars we have is equal to our wealth. And we start thinking, well, geez, 20 years ago, I wanted to have $3 million, and today I got my 3 million. Well, 3 million today isn't the same as 3 million then. So people aren't as wealthy as they think. So they start retiring, and they don't have enough assets or resources to get to the end of life comfortably. So what's that going to do? It's going to push dependency over to government. What's that going to do? It's going to create higher costs in social programs. The result will be more debt. How are we going to get the debt? We're going to create more money. How are we going to pay for it? We're going to create more inflation, because it's a hidden tax, guys. It's a hidden tax. Um, when we see, inflation is 7.5%, that's a tax. It's just not an income tax. It's just not coming out of your paycheck, but it's been a hidden tax since the start of the concept forever, and it will always be. So what happens? The government will create more money as people require more government services, and it'll create more debt, requiring more inflation. The process will just repeat and compound. It may not be at 7.5%. We may get down to the Fed target of 2%. Just go to their website. Their target is 2%. They have to have inflation. So my point of this is the reason this ties into generational freedom, and that's what we always talk about, is we're not talking next week or next year. We got to think long term. Chess, not checkers. What's going to happen? Well, as the mass numbers of people start to become poorer and poorer, and the wealth divide grows, and the middle class gets crushed, which is a fact that's happening. Well, then uh, you have to consider that those people are going to become dependent on the few, the people that are getting crushed. Who are the few? The central planners, the politicians, the people with resources. So all of a sudden, people, whether they agree with their philosophies or not, are going to be pushed into a position to support people that will help them. So that starts to threaten freedom for our kids, for our grandkids. And this is the part people really need to grasp, because if you look at, I had the benefit of living in Europe for a couple years there when I was in the military, and it's different over there. Even then, it was different over there, and it's very socialist over there. So we start talking about socialism, and it's like we're calling each other names. No, it's just a philosophy. And if this continues, it's just a fact that poverty is going to continue to increase in America, and it's going to create the masses relying on the few for goods and services. The few are going to be people that are being elected and put in positions of power. What's that sound like? It sounds like all of human history, where people, kings and queens and dictators or whatever society you're studying, the few controlled the wealth, the goods, the services, and the many worked to serve the few. Well, America flipped that idea on its head when we came along, and we said, no, the wealth and everything belongs to the people, and the government serves the people. And what's happening through economics is people are becoming punished through inflation and becoming poorer and poorer. Well, our need on social programs is growing more and more. And does it look like, when you're watching over the last, not even just couple 2 years, which is insane, but the last 10 years, the politicians are becoming more powerful? This is a process. It's like putting a frog in water. This is not an event. It's an evolution, and that's what's coming. So what we advocate is for people to own real assets required by real people in the real economy, and start shifting your focus from acquiring uh, dollar bills, which are going down in purchasing power, and start acquiring numbers of units, start acquiring necessary services, energy, food, shelter, start collecting residential doors. How many doors do you control? How many barrels of oil do you control? What kind of necessary services do you control? How many ATMs that certain people require for banking, how many of those do you control? Whatever the case may be, medical services, something. We're going to have to start controlling things that are required by real people in the real economy, because those who do will benefit. Because at the end of the day, if the currency collapsed, you go to that extreme, and we were trading in banana peels, and I control residential housing, and people have to have a roof over their head, well, now I collect banana peels. It really doesn't matter if the government's paying the bills, paying all the rental bills, because people don't have enough to get by, and we're socialist in nature. Well, if I control the physical goods everyone needs, or you control the physical goods everyone needs, then that puts you in a position of advantage. It keeps you a spot at the negotiating table. But also, us collecting these items and becoming decentralized, everybody likes Bitcoin because it's very, very decentralized. It allows everybody to spread their resources across the country and control a lot of real assets without centralized control. It's really hard to get, 50,000 landlords to all do the same thing, whereas it's very easy to get 100 CEOs of mega corporations to do the same thing if a politician were to request that in the future. So that's how it ties to generational freedom, guys. Again, not tinfoil hat stuff. Just look at the world, what's going on, do a little bit of deductive reasoning, and think about where this is going and how it compares to all of human history. That's why we're so passionate about economics. So with that, we hope you see you on the next video. And like we always say, if you haven't got our SWOT reports, you see it in there. Teams up. Let's go make something happen. Let's get together. Let's collaborate this. Let's share these videos, and let's come together and do what we can to preserve generational freedom. We'll see you on the next one. Teams up.